President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. And I'd like to hand the floor to the co-prosecutors to put questions to the witness. And the remaining combined time for both the co-prosecutors and the lead co-lawyers is 1 session. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, I want to move now to another incident that you discuss in your OCIJ statement. And this has to do with a guard named Tin. Do you remember a guard by that name?
Yes, I recall his name.
Did you ever see him kill anyone? And if so, could you describe that incident for us?
No.
Do you recall an occasion on which he asked you to bury a body?
Yes.
Can you describe that situation for us?
There are two persons, Tim and Tim. And Tim was the security guard at that re-education school. The detainees were of ethnic minority, and one person fled at night time. Then they checked, and they placed a checkpoint on the road, and at 2 a.m. that person returned. That is, he came across Tim, and Tim used AK-47 rifle to kill and shot that escaped detainee dead.
Did you actually see Tim shoot this detainee?
Yes, I witnessed it with my own eyes.
And do you know why this ethnic detainee was shot?
I did not know of his real ethnicity, either Charai or Cavaldi. He fled from the area to go for a meal at the village, and after he returned, he came across this security personnel group, and he was shot dead.
Now, you said he returned. Was he on his way back to the security center at the time that he was killed? What do you mean when you say he returned?
Yes, he returns to the re-education place when he was shot dead.
And where did you bury him?
It was further than the kitchen hall on the way to a plantation field, and the area is now for a cashew plantation.
I want to move to another incident now. This one involves a woman whose gallbladder was removed. Do you recall that incident? And if so, can you describe that for us?
Yes, I recall that, though I cannot recall her name, and the person who killed her named Nyok. who was a security guard at the re-education center. He hacked her back open and removed her gallbladder and hung it at the kitchen hall. I did not witness the execution itself, but I saw the gallbladder, which was stained with blood, when he hung it at the kitchen.
And how did you learn that it was Nyok, in fact, who had taken this woman's gallbladder?
He himself told the people at the kitchen that he was the one who hacked open her back and removed the gallbladder.
And do you know why he had done that to this woman in particular?
I did not know the reason he did it. What I saw is that the guard came to the kitchen with the blood-stained gallbladder.
I want to just go back to your OCIJ interview and ask you about something you said about this event. This is ERN 0027 2587 in English, in Khmer 0018 9254, and in French 0027 2594 to 95. And you discuss this event, and you say much of what you've just told us now, that Nyok was the one who was talking about it, and that it had been hung in the kitchen to frighten the other prisoners. But then you say the following about the reason. You say, quote, "The woman had been with a rubber plantation union worker who had been sexually immoral with a man. I can't remember her name, but her husband's name was San. He's still alive today in Stung Treng," unquote. Does that refresh your memory as to what might have been the reason that Nyok cut out this woman's gallbladder?
Yes, I recall that she was accused of having an affair with a man. And her husband, named Son, lived in Stung Trai, although I do not know whether he is living now.
Okay, and again, I'm moving on to another topic now. Do you recall an occasion on which a number of Vietnamese prisoners, 5 or 6, were brought to the O Kan Sang Re-Education Center?
No, I do not recall anything in relation to Vietnamese detainees.
I want to read you something that was said by Chom Sai, the chairman of O Kan Sang Security Center, when he was interviewed by the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges. And this is document E3/405 at answer 12. And this is what he says. Quote, "Shortly before 1979, before the strong Vietnamese attacks in 1979, I saw that a group of 6 Vietnamese civilians had been taken prisoner on the O Ya Dao village battlefield along the border because those people had come to do reconnaissance along Route 19, along which the Vietnamese were attempting to attack. After their interrogations were completed, upper echelon decided to finish off those persons in accordance with the orders of the Division 801 commander, who made the decision to finish them off," unquote. Having heard Chom Sai's account of that incident, does that refresh your memory? Do you know anything about this incident or not?
No, I did not know about a group of these Vietnamese.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I want to turn now to the topics of uh, interrogation and torture. And can I just start by asking you whether you were aware of torture ever being used during the interrogation process at O Kan Sang?
Personally, my hands were tied and my feet were shackled when I was being interrogated. However, I was not tortured. For other detainees, when they were interrogated, they were beaten and electrocuted with the power from a manual phone.
And how did you know that other detainees were beaten and electrocuted during their interrogations?
The interrogation house uh, was carried out in a long house. However, personally, I was integrated at a separate place, which was about 50 meters from where I was detained. Those people were interrogated and tortured in that long building.
And how did you know that? How did you learn that?
I witnessed it personally.
And can you tell us how it is that you were able to witness the torture during interrogation of other detainees? In other words, where were you that you were able to see it or hear it?
As I have just stated, the re-education center's buildings were built out of bamboo tree leaves, so that you could actually see through. And the main purpose of the center was to prevent us from escaping, but not to prevent us from seeing through.
Do you know who it was that carried out the torture during the course of interrogations?
I do not recall their names. However, they were the security guards of the re-education center.
And who was it who carried out your interrogation in which, as you said, you were not tortured?
Pin was the interrogator.
Now, there's a specific incident you mention in your OCIJ statement about a prisoner from a division prisoner from a place called Bokau, if I'm saying that correctly. Um, do you remember anything about a division prisoner from there being tortured during interrogation?
Yes, I recall that. Those prisoners who were brought in, they were ordered to write their biographies while they were in bed. And when they thought that the biographies were not consistent with what they had, then they used a plier to torture them until they became unconscious.
Did this happen to one prisoner, or was there more than one prisoner in the group?
There was only one prisoner who was tortured that way.
And do you know what happened to him following his interrogation and torture?
And by next morning, the person disappeared and did not know where he was taken to.
And in your own interrogation, do you recall what kinds of questions you were asked?
As I testified this morning, I was asked what kind of offense that I made. That's why I was brought to the center, and I replied that I never made any mistake before the party. And then I was accused of using the capitalist techniques. That's the reason I was accused.
Was anything ever mentioned about the KGB or the CIA during the course of your interrogation?
No, I was only asked about the technique.
I want to ask you about another quote from the statement you gave to the OCIJ investigators, and this is English page 00272585, Khmer 00189252, and French 00272593. Now this quote, you're not talking about interrogation at this point. You're talking about the prisoners being in the cells. And what you say is, quote, prisoners could talk with one another normally, such as asking about one another's family histories and exchanging normal greetings. But they did not dare talk politics for fear of being accused of being KGB and CIA, unquote. Can you tell us, why were you afraid of being accused of being KGB or CIA?
In the re-education center, detainees who were shackled together could speak about our being or well-being or about the family members, but we were afraid of speaking about anything else, as we would be accused of being an KGB or CIA agent. Usually people who were taken away and killed because they were accused of being agents for KGB or CIA.
So were you aware of actual situations in which prisoners at Okan Sang had been accused of being KGB or CIA agents?
No, I did not. I only heard the guards speaking about the agents, and of course, upon hearing that, we were terrified.
And what did you hear the guards saying about KGB or CIA agents?
God said most of the people who were killed were the secret agents of KGB or CIA.
Did the guards say that to you, the prisoners, or is that something you heard them saying to each other?
Of course, they never said that to the detainees. They spoke to each other in a loud voice so we could overhear it.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about the conditions of detention. Can you tell us how many buildings prisoners were kept in, if you know, how many separate buildings there were?
If my recollection is not wrong, there were three long buildings where detainees were housed.
And can you describe for us the way in which prisoners were shackled and tell us for what portion of the day the prisoners were shackled?
I did not know the duration. However, there were three types of shackles and cuff. One was that they were chained and locked, and second, they were shackled with a metal bar, and thirdly, they were shackled with a wooden bar.
And do you know whether all prisoners were shackled, or was it just some prisoners who were shackled?
Any detainee who arrived, they would be placed in a wooden press shackle.
And can you tell the court what you would do if you had to use the toilet when you were shackled inside the building or inside the cell?
At the re-education center, there was no bathroom. If we needed to urinate, we had to relieve ourselves in a bamboo tube, and then we had to empty it by ourselves when we were let out.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us what happened to prisoners who broke the rules at O Kansang Re-Education Center?
The regulations were that first, do not attempt to flee. Second, do not steal.
Are you aware of any, well, you've told us about one prisoner who tried to flee and who was shot. Are you aware of any other prisoners who violated rules and were punished as a result?
There was another detainee. He did not flee, and he was detained in the building. However, when he was let out to go and pull the grass, he stole a durian seed which was being planted, and he actually burned that durian seed, and at night time he was taken away and killed.
And other than that prisoner, were you aware of any other prisoners who disappeared?
No, I did not. However, what I knew is that we were detained in that detention building, and whenever a guard called a detainee out at night or detainees out at night, we were terrified because those who were caught out at night never returned.
Okay, I want to turn to the topic of health and hygiene and medical care now. Can you tell us whether you're aware of any prisoners getting sick and dying at the O Kansang Re-Education Center?
Yes, there were.
Can you describe those situations for us? Tell us maybe what diseases they had, what treatment they received, if any, and what happened.
What I observed is that there was a detainee named Moon who was also a rubber plantation union worker. He had diarrhea and died. And then there was another case of a detainee who also had dysentery and died while he was still being chained in the room.
Did either of those men receive any medical attention for their illnesses?
I did not know about the treatment. It's up to those who were in charge of the re-education center.
And what about your wife, who you've told us was pregnant at the time? Do you know whether she received any medical attention during her pregnancy?
When she was due, the medic who was on site came to see her every day. However, I did not know what kind of medicine that was given to her, whether it was a modern form of medicine or a traditional medicine.
Okay, I want to ask you now about work. Can you tell us what kind of work the prisoners at Okansang were required to do?
The work in the re-education center was that number one to plant potato and number two to plant vegetable.
And I think in your OCIJ statement you also mentioned something about carrying wood. Can you tell us about that, if you recall that?
Wood carrying happened only occasionally when detainees were sent to cut wood in the forest and carried it to build a house for the commander there to reside.
Was the work that the detainees were required to do physically demanding?
The work there was to pull the grass with your bare hand, and we were not given any hole to dig it. And we plant vegetable, for instance, only with human fertilizer, that is our feces, and everything is manual.
Was there a certain amount of work that each prisoner was required to complete? Was there any sort of measured quota of work to be done?
No, there was no work quota, and wherever we were headed to work, we would work as a group, except those who work in the kitchen. Usually, we would work as a group when we were tasked to remove the grass.
Can you tell us what your working hours were?
Answer: no specific working hours. We would work in the morning and then lunch break, meal break, and resume work. And after the evening, we were allowed to go to sleep. We were not allowed to move freely.
In your OCIJ statement, and the ERN for this is English 0027 2586, Khmer 0018 9253, and French 0027 2594. You said that prisoners worked from 6 until 11 a.m., then rested for lunch, went back to work from 1 until 6 p.m., and then rested and ate in a dining hall, and then were sent back to detention, locked in from the outside with guards posted. Does that match your memory? Were those the working hours, or was it in fact not a set working hour as you've just told us now?
Answer. That statement is correct. However, as I said, we depended on the biological clock or the sun. So it based on our assumption when we were assigned to work, and we worked from the morning up until 11 or 12. So it was based on our assumption and based on the biological clock, that is the sun.
Okay, can I ask you now about food? Can you describe what kind of food you received in the Okansang prison?
Answer. At re-education school of Okansang, they mixed rice with corn and sweet potato.
And was the food sufficient for the work that you were expected to do and for living? Did you have enough food?
Answer. We received a bowl of a meal. The bowl was small, and a bowl of soup for 4 people at a time.
Did you lose weight? Did you become thinner while you were working at the Okansang re-education school?
Answer. It was not the place that we were given supplementary food or enjoy sufficient food to eat. So I was so skinny. I did not. I never weighed myself, but you know the trousers that I wore was so loose.
Okay, and now before I finish, I just want to briefly go back to something you said at the beginning of your testimony today. You were asked how many times you had given statements or been interviewed, and what I understood you to say that there were 2 occasions. The first one was in the Khmer Rouge Re-Education Center, and the second one was at your house. Did I understand that correctly?
Answer. It happened at the old re-education school and then at the building that I was detained.
But when you're discussing those two statements, those were both things that happened at the Okansang Security Center. Is that correct?
Answer. That is correct.
Okay, and that's separate then from the time that you were interviewed by officials of this court, correct?
Answer. I could recall that the first time a foreigner came to interview me at the old re-education school, and for the second time the Khmer interviewer came to my house to interview me. I at that time did not know their positions.
Okay, thank you for those answers. Mr. President, I have no further questions. Thank you.
President, thank you. Now the floor is given to lead co-lawyers for civil parties to put questions to this witness. You have the floor now. Pei Ong. Good afternoon, Mr. President. I would like to seek the floor for lawyer Tisrina. President, yes. Tisrina. First of all, very good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honors, everyone in and around the courtroom. My name is Tisrina. I am the representative for civil parties. I have several questions to seek your clarification about Oceanside Security Center. First, I need you to clarify a few points for me. You answered the question by the co-prosecutor about a person by the name Sarun, and you stated that he was the commander of Division 801. Is that correct? Answer. Yes. His name was Sarun. It's correct. That is the statement I gave to the co-prosecutor. Question. Besides Sarun, do you know other individuals else beside that person? And also, please describe the function and position of those who were part of Division 801. Answer. I was not part of division, and as I said, during that time I was not allowed to move freely far away from my location. I knew only the security guards at Oceanside Security Center, and they told me that the commander of the division was Sarun. I knew no one else besides Sarun. Question. You made a mention that you were detained in the security center. So my question has something to do with the treatment of detainees. And I am focusing now on the disciplines and the process at the re-education school. So how were detainees detained at that place? Answer. As I said at the beginning, there were regulations in that re-education school. Those detainees in Oceanside Security Center, number one, they are not allowed to run away and steal. And when we were questioned or interrogated, we had to give answers. And I did not know what happened to those who did not give answer, and perhaps they were tortured. Lawyer, perhaps my question is not clear to you. I have a different question, in fact, instead. You were detained in Oceanside Security Center based on your experience. What were the working methods of security guards? So the security guards adhere to the practices and regulation applied at that security center. Answer. security guards, whether they had to adhere to the regulation or they created their own rule, I do not have any idea. I do not know whether the regulations were established by the security guards themselves or they received those regulations from upper echelon. Lawyer, now I am asking you about the arrests. You were arrested and detained in Organized Security Center. When you first arrived in that center, how many prisoners or detainees were there when you arrived? Were there many of them? Answer. Upon my entry, at that time I passed a building. I did not dare to look straight into that building. I had a glance through the cracks of the wall, and I saw detainees lying on the ground, locked into the metal bar or shackles. Lawyer, thank you. So you did not look around at different places inside the security center, is that correct? Answer. That building I passed was along the road that I was walking, and I was guarded by 4 or 5 security guards armed with an AK rifle, so I did not dare to do anything but walk and following them. Lawyer, thank you. So how long were you detained in that security center? Answer. I told the court in the morning already. I was a union worker. I was arrested on 16 June 1977, and I was detained up until December 1978. At that time, there were attacks or offensive by the Vietnamese troops, and I took the chance to escape from that security center with others. Lawyer, so you were detained at that center for quite some time. Did you see that new prisoner, said a civil party lawyer, coming in? And were old detainees replaced by new detainees? Then how many times did that take place? Answer. To my knowledge, the detainees in the center were not transferred to any other places. At night time, the security guards call out the name. 3 or 4 of them were called out of the building, but I did not notice that the detainees were sent to somewhere else for detention. Lawyer, so from my understanding, 3 or 4 detainees were taken out at night, and then a new batch, 3 or 4 new detainees would be in replacement. Is that correct? Answer. I told the court already about this point. At night time, if I could hear the sound of a door opening, and a person was told that he or she would be sent for re-education, that person never returned. So it did not happen like what you said. Sometimes 1 or 2 were taken out and no replacement. Lawyer, were prisoners taken in and taken out of the building quite often in that center? Answer: it did not happen very often. Lawyer: I have a follow-up question for you in relation to this point. When was the time that many prisoners were detained at that center? Answer: I told the court already in the morning. One time I saw a large group of Jarai minority were sent into the security center. That was the time that I saw a large group of people were sent in. Lawyer: thank you. Now I am asking you about the detention. Earlier, you have stated about the detention, but your answers are not clear to me, so I need you to clarify those points, particularly the conditions of detention. How were the living conditions of the detainees? Answer: regarding living conditions of detainees at Oakenside Security Center, we were assigned to work at daytime, and at night time we would be sent back into the building and locked. We were required to be quiet at night time. Lawyer: thank you. Now I am interested in interrogation. Regarding interrogation of detainees, were all of them interrogated after they had been sent into that center? Answer: I do not know about that point. I do not know for sure whether all of them had been interrogated or only some. Lawyer: thank you. My next question about the distance from your room to the detention room. So how far was it between your room and the detention room? Rather, interrogation room. It was about 50 meters away from one another, as I told the court already. From the detention room to the interrogation room, it was blocked by complete trees. Lawyer: you stated that the distance was about 50 meters away from the detention room. Could you be able to hear the interrogation sound? Answer: I did not hear the content of the interrogation. The interrogation did not um, make much sounds. They asked and interrogated detainees very softly, but on some occasion I could hear the screaming from that place. Lawyer: I want you to tell the court about the screaming from the interrogation room. So how many times did you hear those screamings? Answer: I do not remember that. I could hear the screaming, but not very often. I cannot tell the exact number how many times I heard those screamings. Lawyer: thank you. You discussed about an issue, particularly about the night time when a prisoner had been taken out. Did you happen to hear that the music was broadcasted over the loudspeaker during the time that the execution happened?
តាក់តែមកដល់ឆ្លើយតប
President, please hold on. Mr. Winner, you have the floor now, Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no idea where this question is coming from. I don't think he spoke about execution of the people who were taken out at night. He said, or he testified, that he heard about them being removed and never returning, so there's no evidence at all given by this witness about execution. And music being played, I'm not quite sure where that comes from. I object to this question on those two grounds. There's no basis in the evidence for this question.
Lawyer, I would like to respond to the observation. The witness testified that the prisoners or detainees had been taken out at night, and the witness testified that detainees disappeared at night time, so everyone was terrified. Regarding the music over the loudspeaker, I would like to reformulate my question, Mr. President. Lawyer, I am now moving to another question. After detainees had been interrogated, were they released? Answer: after the interrogation, no one in re-education school was freed. Lawyer, thank you. Lawyer, concerning your answer to the question by the co-prosecutor about the cutting open the back of a woman to remove gallbladder, you stated that Nyok took that gallbladder and hung it in the kitchen hall. So were many people there when he took that gallbladder and hung in the kitchen hall?
បាទខ្ញុំសូមស្មាន
Answer: it is my estimate and assumption. The time that happened at around 9 o'clock. At that time, some detainees had already been sent out to work, and only the people in the kitchen could see that happening. Lawyer, thank you. What about you? You stated that you witnessed the incident by your own eyes. So how did you feel at the time when you saw the gallbladder was hung in the kitchen hall? Were other detainees aware of that incident?
បាទ
everyone later knew about that because women in the kitchen made mention about that incident afterwards.
សូមអរគុណក្រោយពី
Lawyer, thank you. After that incident was widely known to others, how did detainees in that center feel since they started to know that a woman was cut open her back to remove the gallbladder?
បាទមើល
Answer. From their facial expression, particularly those who went to have meal and those who worked in the kitchen hall, they were so frightened. Lawyer, thank you. I am now asking about the grave. You discussed the grave B52 crater. So did you happen to see a B52 crater?
បាទសូមជំរាបជូន
Answer. I happened to see only one crater. And for the dead bodies, most of them were buried in the trenches dug during the wartime.
សូមអរគុណ
Lawyer, thank you. Regarding the trenches which were dug during the wartime, so how many trenches did you see at the time?
បាទត្រង់
Answer. Actually, that place was the base or headquarter of former Lone Wolf soldiers. So trenches were in each house of that headquarter, and most of the dead people were buried in those trenches.
Uh, ពាក់ព័ន្ធជាមួយនឹង
Lawyer, regarding women and children, did you happen to know that persecution happened to women and children who were detained in the Organized Security Center? Answer. I do not know whether torture was inflicted on women and children. I told the court earlier I saw women, pregnant women and children were being walked.
សូមអរគុណ
Question, maybe this is my last question to you. When the Vietnamese forces arrived, or a bit prior to that, can you tell the chamber how many prisoners remained at the Au Consign Security Center? Answer. I did not know how many there were. I did not know how many prisoners were detained in each building. For the buildings where the door was opened, I saw 4 or 5 prisoners, but I could not see how many prisoners were detained in the buildings where the doors were closed, and I myself just tried to flee. Question. For those who could flee, like in your case, how many of them altogether? Answer. The chief of the re-education center ordered us to leave through one same exit, and there were more than 20 of us. Question. So those who were between 20 to 30 who left through that exit, did it happen on that only one time, or were they let out on separate occasions as well? Answer: we were let out at that time. There was a group also was let out. Question. And when you left or consigned, did anything happen to you and to them? Answer: when we left or consigned, while we were en route to the border demarcation of Stung Trai province, we encountered some problems. Some prisoners who could not walk and who were ill were not allowed to move on. Question. Those prisoners who could not walk and were not allowed to continue, were there any measures taken against them, or were they just left behind? Answer: some of those people were purged while en route. Question. What did you mean when you said they were purged? Answer: those who could not walk were left in one place, and others were smashed. And those who could not walk, that is, those who had swollen arms or legs and who could not walk, they were placed in one location, because when the Vietnamese troop reached Ratanakiri province, everybody was in shock, so they would not wait for them to continue the journey. Question. And did anything happen to those who were asked to continue the journey? Answer: when we reached the Sesan river bank, rather Sekong river bank, the Vietnamese troops came from Stung Trai province from the other side. So the soldiers and the forces from Re-Education Center were fleeing the area, while we, the detainees, were also fleeing separately. So that was where we separated from the security force. Thank you, Mr. Sivapati, and Mr. President. I conclude my questions. President, it is now convenient for a short break. We take a break now and resume at 5 to 3 to continue our proceedings. Court officer, please assist the witness at the awaiting room for witnesses and civil parties and invite him back into the courtroom at 5 to 3. The court is now in recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ